Hello, I'm Keith Allen. I want to talk to you all about the fundamentals of duck call operation. Now, the difficult thing about teaching someone to duck call is to make it simple, because learning to duck call will never be easy, but we have to make the concept simple and manageable and attainable, and that's what my goal is here today. And when we get done with each of these steps, you're going to be able to make all the sounds that you need to be successful in the field. And that's where I get the pleasure out of doing this, is seeing people learning to call better and seeing the results in the field, seeing ducks respond to you better. And I want you to be sold on that that's going to happen with you, because if you're not sold on the fact that learning to duck call better is going to ultimately result in you having more success in the field, then you're not going to work hard at this, because this is going to be tough at times. But I'm going to try to give you simple steps. And if you'll just do one thing for me, you're going to have success. I want you to master each step before going on to the next. When I hear someone call, I can hear the deficiencies in their calling at one of these steps. So if we're mastering each step before we go to the next one, then we will have mastered the fundamentals of duck call operation. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is how do you hold the call. And that may seem fairly elementary to many, but it really does matter. And I've actually seen folks who can operate a call decently, but how they hold the call and what they do with their hand is causing them problems. So how I like to explain it is you take the soft skin tissue between your thumb and your index finger, and you set the insert of the call right there. You just let it rest right in there, and you just make like a C, all right? At least when I'm looking at it like that, it's a C. Just set the call in there, relax. Don't do anything rigid. Don't squeeze down. Don't have it wide open. Just form a simple C. Have that call going straight through your hand and that soft part of your hand. And this is really important when you're learning to call, and even after you've learned and you're drilling, like doing exercises on the call and practicing, do not move your hand. Now, you're going to find after you master call operation that you can use your hand to make different sounds, to bend the notes, but for the most part, folks do way too much of that, right? We're trying to do with our hand things that we should be doing with our anatomy here, our throat and the air production, right? So for practicing, we're going to isolate just how we present air into the call by not moving the hand. So just put it there, have a C, hold it comfortably, and don't move it. And the number one thing you don't want to do in holding a duck call is to use your other hand. That's for goose calling. The next step we're going to talk about is air production. We now know how to hold the call, and I'm going to talk briefly about how you produce air. The magic in duck calling is blowing hot air into the duck call. That's what makes it raspy. If you've ever picked up a duck call, a lot of folks, especially who have trouble with a single rig duck call, you pick up a single rig and it sounds real flat. It doesn't sound raspy. It's because the air you're blowing through the call is cold. That sounds silly, but what does that even mean? Well, if you're eating a hot bowl of chili and you had the spoon in there and you picked it out, how would you blow air on that spoonful of boiling hot chili? You would get the air channel real small and cool it down by going, right? Real small. It's cold. And that's how you blow a coach's whistle, right? You blow air through the whistle. Well, when we're blowing a duck call, we're actually not blowing air. Because I want you to think about this. If there were a candle sitting right there, and I was blowing cold air like I was cooling down this spoonful of chili, I could almost blow that candle out. But when you're blowing a duck call, you're blowing hot air. And what does that look like? Well, imagine that you were hunting and your hands are freezing, especially when you're deer hunting, right? Your hands are freezing. And what are you constantly doing? You put your hands up to your mouth, and you blow it real down from down deep. And you're really not blowing air, because if that duck call right there were a candle and I was blowing hot air just like I would to warm my hands up, that candle wouldn't even flicker. Right? There's not a lot of air coming out when you're doing hot air. And that's the magic in blowing a duck call. So really check yourself at all times, no matter what level you are in your calling. Am I blowing hot air? Because if you're not, your call is going to sound thinner and you're not going to be happy with the tone. If you were to ask a pre-K classroom anywhere in America, how does a cow go? They would say, moo, right? But if you were to ask them, how does a duck go? They would say, quack. And so that is the most important thing we have to learn in our duck calling, is how to quack. All of our calling is based on a quack. And you're going to be excited to learn later that all of these fancy sounds that you're wanting to do are just a sequence of quacks. So if we learn to do a quack perfectly, we've laid the foundation to be able to blow a duck call really well. So let's talk about making a perfect quack. Quack, our English word quack, we spell it Q-U-A-C-K, right? So we start qua, that's the start of the word with that consonant, qua. A is the vowel, C-K, K is the ending consonant. So it starts with a consonant, ends with a consonant, and the sound is sustained on a vowel. So how we're going to learn how to do this is to work on the vowel, right? All the words you're hearing me speak is started with a consonant, ends with a consonant, and has a vowel. And the only sounds that we make in speech that we can sustain are vowels. So that's what we're going to work on. So what I like to say is when I'm blowing in a duck call, I want you to think about the vowel I. I spell it I-H. I. I put the H on it because to me, in my mind, we're visualizing this. It's not literally I or A in quack. We're just having to come up with a vowel on the call that we can sustain. Because if we can blow that vowel and it sounds like a duck and ducky, then all we got to do is wrap that up with a consonant on the front and a consonant on the end. So how do we make that vowel? The most important thing in duck calling is blowing hot air into the duck call, right? We got to blow hot air, and we're going to make that vowel sound I on hot air. I want you to think of this as the A in quack. Because if I can blow that consonant and hold it, or that vowel and hold it, see how steady I can hold that? That's the hardest thing in all of duck calling, what I'm doing right now, holding that vowel. Then, if I can start that with a consonant and end it, then I'm almost to the word quack. How I teach it is with, and I want you to think about this, is with the consonant D. Dit, dit, dit. Right? Dit, dit, dit. That's how I think about it. It doesn't matter what the consonant or the vowels is. That's just how we're conceptualizing it. The point is you have to do a sustained note. It's a vowel. You pick it, and then you have to start it with a consonant and end it. It's that simple. Now, what I like to do is when I get to that point is I add, after that D, I think about the word dwit, that hum of the W after the D. Dwit, right? Dwit. Now that sounds pretty good, right? Sounds like a quack. All that is a vowel, started with a consonant and ended with a consonant. And you've got to figure out how to do a quack. Now, I'm going to give you a tip. I'm not with you. You're working on this by yourself. But if you can't make a quack like how you want, then you cannot do the vowel how you want. Don't worry about doing a whole quack. Just hold the call on a vowel, or or however you want to do it. Right? Hear how steady that is and raspy? So now, dit. You hear how that vowel does not change. It's the same vowel that I did isolated on its own. Do a W. And you have a perfect quack. The next step is being able to do two of them on one breath. If you can do one perfectly, you got to do two. Right? Then do three. Then do four. And when you have mastered being able to do one on a breath, then two on a breath, and then up to 10 on one breath perfectly, then you're able to go to the next step. I'm going to show you how you do 10. I'm going to try to do 10 real time here without practicing. I'm going to get one. I'm going to get two on one breath. Now I'm going to try to do 10 as perfectly identical, all of them the same, identical, 10 of them on one breath. Now, you don't realize this, but I have mastered duck calling when I can do that. Because all of the other sounds you hear is just a series of quacks on a descending scale. And we're going to talk about that next. Now that we've mastered how to do a perfect quack, and we can do several of them on one breath, we're going to get to the fun stuff now. How do we blow a greeting of a duck, right? Those sounds that we know ducks make and that we know we can get ducks to react to. Well, we practice on blowing sequences of quacks, and we figure out how to manipulate those quacks on a musical scale. Really, a duck call is just a musical instrument, right? It's just a crude instrument, and we have to produce air in it that's hot to make it sound like a duck, or it doesn't sound like a duck or a duck call. It just sounds like a kazoo, right? So once we get it sounding like a duck, then it's an instrument that we can blow a quack up and down the scale, and then I'm going to show you a trick, and you're going to be calling like ducks in no time if you can do multiple quacks on one breath. This is what I want you to do. Remember when I talked about in the last track where we want to do 10 perfect quacks in a row? Let's start there. I have demonstrated that I have control of the call. I am telling it what I want it to do. I wanted to do 10 quacks on the bottom of the duck scale, right? The next step is to do that and just go up a musical scale. Sounds weird, but I want you to stay with me. Keep the rhythm steady. Do not change the rhythm. Do not change the volume. Only change the pitch, the highness and lowness of the sound of your quack. Watch this. Right? We went up a scale. Just play with it. Doesn't matter how many notes. Just start at the bottom, stay steady, and go up the scale. Does that sound like a duck? No. But I'm going to trick you. I'm going to get you somewhere quick that would have taken you years to get there if you stay right with me. Now, we go up the scale on one breath, and in that same breath, we come back down. Watch this. You hear that? Went up like a bell curve and came back down. Do it again. Now, I want you to imagine if that were a shape of a bell curve, we went up, right? Those quacks went bump, 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 bump. And I want you to cut off this half of it, the going up. And we just start at the top. I'm going to go up and down, and then I'm going to just do the back half. I'm going to get you sold on this so you stay with me. Going up and down. Now, what if I take the front half of that bell curve off? Right? Now I've started quacks at the top of the scale and going down, which is exactly what a duck does. I've not done anything fancy. I have just produced quacks on a steady rhythm, starting at the top of a duck scale and going down. Let's practice going up again. Again, I want you to practice this on your own. Now just the back half. Now, once I master that, I'll do it faster. Same thing, just faster. Now, pull the first note, make it slower. Same thing. Now back to the faster one. Folks, when you hear a duck greeting, all you're hearing her do is quack at different pitches, starting at the top of the duck scale and going down. Can you do that if you can't quack? No. Can you quack if you can't produce hot air? No. That's why I say it's step after step after step. That's how you do a cadence of a mallard hen. The next thing we're going to talk about is feed calling. Now, feed calling is fun to do, it's fun to hear, but it's hard to learn. And I don't know, if it's super important to learn as a beginner. So don't get hung up on feed calling sounds. But you can't have a full arsenal without feed calling sounds. Now, before we go into feed calling and how you actually do it, I want to give you an idea about something because this will help your calling in general. When ducks are feed calling, they're not tiptoeing around saying, boy, this corn is really good. Y'all should come down here and eat it. They're actually saying to other ducks around them, get out of my food bowl. Just like a mean dog would if he's sitting there eating in his bowl and another dog comes up to him, what does he do? He growls and spaces that dog away from him. And that's what ducks are doing when they're feed calling. So that should give you a good idea of how you want this to sound. It's not a pretty sound, right? It's not supposed to be nice. It's supposed to be, get out of my food. So how do we make these feed call sounds? Well, you make them on the back of the throat, right? G, with G sounds primarily, and low voice. Everything we're doing with feed calling are clucks, and those clucks come out like that, like a cam, if we're doing it with the back of our throat, right? So how I teach people is to say gu, 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 ga, 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 gi, 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 duck, duck, duck. Doesn't have to be literally that, but the point of that is you're making most of the sounds with the back of the throat, then throw in a few of them with the front of the tongue, duh, 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 right? And then that sounds like different ducks clucking. So goo, goo, goo. How silly is that? Sounds like baby talk. Ga, 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 gi, 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 duck, duck, duck. So how we want to put that and present it into the call with a low voice is goo, 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 ga, 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 gi, 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 duck, 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 with a rhythm like that. So how I practice this, and I still practice to this day, when my feed calling don't sound as clucky as I want it to, with that natural kind of whine in it, then I want to put a lot of that low voice and and a lot of pressure, like a kid playing army, right, with a machine gun. Gotcha, right? That's how we do feed calling. Sounds silly, but that's just, and I'm placing it in different ways and hearing those different sounds coming out. But that'll get you close quick on what we call single cutting clucks, right? So single cut meaning I'm using the back of my throat or the front of my tongue. Do, 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 gu, 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 gu. That's the back. The front is do, 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 back, gu, 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 gu. Now, what happens when I alternate them? That is what we call double cutting. Gu, du, gu, du, gu, du, gu, du, gu, du. And you can practice that. So first get the single cuts, back of the throat, and then every once in a while incorporating the front of the tongue. This is the back of the throat, and you'll hear me go to the front of the tongue. See, it has a different tone, and if I alternate those, then I'm double cutting. That's the front and the back, right? And the magic in feed calling and sounding like a pile of ducks is single cutting and then putting that double cutting in that, alternating back and forth. So you're going in and out of single cutting and double cutting like this. And that sounds like a bunch of them, right? And if you have a buddy with you, you're going to sound like a bunch more of them. So that is just the basics of feed calling. Now, one of the things you can do too, and you might have heard me accidentally put one in there, is put quacks, implement quacks in that feeding to create an illusion of even more ducks. And how we do that, and you don't have to get hung up on this, but if you're willing to spend a silly amount of time like I have been in my lifetime to learn how to do it, in your double cutting, you can slow it down as you're practicing and go do ga do ga do ga do good do good do good do good do good do good. That's double cutting, right? And all you do is on that ga, the back of the throat, just drag it. Ga do good do good do ga do good do good do good do good do ga. That's all it is on a low voice. All right, and it sounds so cool when you mix it in there. So if you're mixing the drags in and then alternating single cutting to double cutting, then it comes to life. And you can see that if you have a few folks doing that, you can sound like a bunch of them. And we all know that it's a lot tougher for a couple mallards to ignore a bunch of ducks than it is to just ignore one or two. So we've learned how to put air in the call. We've got it sounding ducky with hot air. We've learned how to blow a quack. We've learned how to blow multiple quacks on one breath. We've then learned how to do cadences of ducks, which are greetings, however you want to refer to it as, by doing sequences of quacks starting at the top of the duck scale and going down, right? We've worked on feed calling, so we have a full arsenal of duck sounds. So then the question is, well, what do we do with it, Keith? How do we use those skills to actually work ducks? Now, this is a topic we could do a podcast for hours on. We could talk, I could nerd out on this forever, but I have come up with kind of a philosophy of calling that I think that it's something that you can think about whenever you're hunting, whenever you're blowing a duck call. And that is that when I'm using a duck call, I'm saying to the ducks one of two things. I'm saying, don't do that, or keep doing what you're doing. Don't do that. Don't go over to the neighbors. Right? Or, yeah. Keep doing what you're doing. Right? And if you're using your duck call and your buddy could not tell you which of those two you're saying through the call, then you need to keep working on it, right? So, when you're duck calling, and you've heard the old saying, call ducks on the corners, that doesn't mean much to me. But I think because ducks aren't ever on a corner, they're working in circles, right? But I think what the spirit of that saying is that if they're not coming to you and doing what you're wanting them to do, thus you're not saying, keep doing what you're doing, then you're saying, don't do that. And how does that sound? Well, we'll find the top of the duck scale. That sounded like a, hey, I'm over here. That sounds pretty good. But does this sound more like don't do what you're doing? See how hard I'm hitting every note? All quacks, starting at the top of the scale, going down. But I'm saying through the call, don't do that. In other words, don't go over there. Because if they hear me say, don't do that, it's startling. Right? You probably were startled when I just said that. Don't do that. And then they react. And now we got a chance, right? Now they're doing something different than what they were doing before we called. And now we know why we've been working at this for a year, probably. Because now we have affected them and have caused them to do something with the call that they weren't intending to do. And that is the magic of not just duck calling, but duck hunting. That's why we're there, to affect them and make them do something that they weren't intending to do. Now, sometimes, usually you don't need to tell them, keep doing what you're doing. That's what we always do because we like to call, right? But usually, all we can do at that point, after we've told them don't do that, and they're sold that we're a duck, they're hunting up our decoys, they're coming in. Usually if we keep calling, hopefully we're saying something that's not interpreted as don't do that because they're coming. And that's exactly what people do when they're coming. They'll still go, the same duck that they just did a while ago to say don't do that. They do it again when they're coming. So what are they going to do? Oh, I wasn't supposed to do that. They move on. So that's what I mean by at that point, if you do anything, you want to say, keep doing what you're doing. So what does that mean? Yeah. Yeah, keep doing what you're doing. Lower, right? Little clucks. A sequence of cluck, or a sequence of quacks. Keep doing what you're doing. If they veer off, we don't want them to do that. Don't do that. They line back up, and as long as we keep them coming into the wind, we got a chance. But let me tell you guys, what most people need to do is when they learn to call and they say, don't do that, and then they start doing what you want to do, they need to shut up, including me. I thought it would be helpful if I pointed out some things that I hear commonly in working with folks with their calling and out hunting, especially on public land. You get to hearing things commonly that you just scratch your head and wonder how people come up with some of the things they do. One of the classic things, and I don't mean to be poking fun at anybody, and I know what happens with this information when I'm talking about pitfalls to avoid, is that everyone sends these to their buddy, right? Said, that sounds like you. That's not constructive, but I do think that there are things that I can help folks with that'll make them more effective and better callers. One of the most common things is what I call a pickup note. So we've talked about that the duck starts at the top of the scale, the duck scale. Right? They always start at the top and go down. Now, you will hear biologists call that a decrescendo, but actually that's an inaccurate term. I mean, they're biologists, they aren't musicians. Decrescendo means it gets softer, but actually a duck does not get softer as it goes down. The volume, I mean. It does not get softer. It's just as strong on the bottom as it is on top. What it is, it's a descending scale of quacks, right? So the pitches, the highness and lowness of sound, start at the top and go down. So it's a descending scale. It's not a decrescendo. So what you hear people do a lot is start on the bottom or in the middle. Hear that pickup note? Now, that sounds kind of funny. Well, and there's a few reasons why you don't want to do it. One is it tips everybody off that it's a hunter and not a duck. And who wants to do that, right? It doesn't sound like a duck. But I don't care if it sounded like a grizzly bear if it would affect ducks, though. So that's not the reason I don't do it. I don't do it and don't want you to do it because it waters down the effectiveness of that cadence. And what I mean by that is, if a duck is going to respond to what you're doing on a duck call, it's going to be the first note. It's going to be that squalling out note, the top of the scale. Right? They're not going to pick the third or fourth note down and think, oh, that sounds good. When you're hammering at them on the top, that first note, that's when you're going to get the reaction. So if you water that down, that note, by starting one lower before, then you've taken away the effectiveness of that first note. That's why you want to take the pickup note out of there. You always want to start at the top of the scale. Now, another common thing that I hear is people will tend to walk up the scale with their quacks. It's kind of the same thing as the pickup note. A duck would never do that, but it's never going to affect a duck by doing that because your first note is not your strongest note. Don't do that. Always start at the top and go to the bottom. Another thing that I see people do is they will put voice into their calling. Like they will literally vocalize. So if you were to turn the call around and ask them to produce air like they do when they duck call, you would hear them actually vocalizing. You can hear me vocalizing in the call then, right? But that is not how you produce air. You produce hot air. You can hear the heat coming through there. No vocalization in your calling, except for feeding sounds. Then you put the voice in. And that's yet another pitfall. Most people, if they've never been taught, put a ton of voice in their quacks and their greetings, and then take the voice out of it in their feeding call. So that it'll be real heavy and muddy on all the cadences. It's hard for me to put voice in it because I've trained myself not to, but it'd be real heavy. And then they get to the feed calling and there's no voice and it's. When actually how you want to call is the opposite. No voice in the quacks and the greetings, just hot air, and a lot of low voice in the feed call. No voice, but voice on the feed call. That makes it growly and strong and makes those ducks space out, right? Space one another. So those are pitfalls to avoid. The toughest thing about teaching duck calling like this is I'm not with you, right? I can't hear you call and respond to that. And if I were with you, we would get closer quicker, right? But I've done this so long and with so many folks that I have figured out that there are recurring things that I suggest to people to try. And actually what they amount to are just little drills that I work on with folks. Now, the first thing I want to teach you is what I call a takeoff note, right? If a greeting of a duck is a sequence of quacks that start on the top of the duck scale and go to the bottom, then logic tells me that the hardest thing about that is the first note. Let's call that the takeoff note. And that's what I want you to practice a bunch. Can I hit that takeoff note? Let's see if I can. There, I hit it, right? I want to hold it and hit it. That's the drill. Hold it. Don't do anything else. Just hold the takeoff note. Where do I want to take off on this duck call? There I did it. See how I'm holding that so steady? Like a laser. It's not bending. It's not wavering. It's raspy and it's solid. I'm supporting it with air. It's hot air. And I'm telling you that most of you listening to this cannot tell me where your takeoff note is on your call, nor can you hit that note and hold it. But if I can hit it and hold it, I know where it is. So that's the first drill I want you to work on, is where is the takeoff note on your call? And can I hold it? Because if I can hit that every time, then I can blow quacks on it, right? That's a drill, and that's the next drill. Finding the takeoff note, then blowing a sequence of quacks on the top of the scale. It's easy to blow them on the bottom. We do that all the time when we blow single quacks like a duck. But we don't ever practice blowing quacks on the top of the scale. Right on one breath. Because if I can do that, then I can come down the scale and it's like a duck. So the most important thing to do when you're practicing, after you've learned how to call, is to know where your takeoff note. In fact, when you grab any duck call, find the takeoff note. If you can't find it, set it down and grab another one. And when you grab a call and you can hit the takeoff note of that call solidly and hold it, buy it. Buy that call. That call fits you, right? Now the next drill, and this one's real fun, right? If a greeting of a duck is a sequence of quacks starting at the top of the scale, going to the bottom, then I should be able to blow quacks on the bottom, quacks on the top, quacks on the bottom, quacks on the top, right? Alternate. So just do that drill. This one's tougher, but if you can do this, you've mastered calling. Top, bottom of the scale. Top, bottom of the scale. If I can blow quacks on the top and the bottom, heck, I know I can blow everything in between. Top, bottom. Let's start at the top and go to the bottom. Right? It's a duck. So there's 3 or 4 drills there. The first one, finding the takeoff note. Then next, blowing a sequence of quacks on that takeoff note. Then next, see if you can go from the top quack to the bottom quack of a duck scale. And then you've got this thing mastered. Guys, I hope some of this information has helped you. And you do not know how much pleasure I derive from seeing someone work on their calling and get better, and then send me pictures of ducks and say, man, they were responding to the call. I wish y'all could get sold. If you've never seen ducks really respond to a duck call, I wish you could get sold on how much you can affect a duck with this duck call. Because if you did, you would work on all of this information a bunch, and you would find so much more enjoyment. Your ducks would be closer, you'd use less shells, and you'd end up getting more ducks. And I hope that I hear from you folks. The call that I've blown today is a pure duck call. I've been making these calls, and we've designed them over 20 years ago. And our friends at Rolling Thunder Game Calls are producing these calls for us. And we'd appreciate you getting on their website, looking at these calls, and we appreciate you watching today.